Hey everybody, I'm Ed Pacheco, candidate for state representative in the 9th Bristol District, and I wanted to talk with you a little bit about today something called large-scale data centers. So large-scale data centers, and the reason why I'm having this conversation with you today is because this isn't something that's here right now. But the way that we get prepared for things is by discussing them ahead of time, getting ahead of the curve and forecasting what could be coming down the pipe, depending on other trends that are happening across the US or in other parts of Massachusetts. So the 9th Bristol District makes up all of Dartmouth and 3 precincts in the north end of New Bedford in Ward 1, precincts D, E, and F. So coincidentally, these also happen to be large areas where there is open land that these developers or organizations, companies that like to build these large-scale data centers look for. So much like they did up with Parallel Products in the north end of New Bedford, or what we're seeing now in Dartmouth, where we have large swaths of land being gobbled up by developers for different projects, we can be very appealing to some of these projects. So this is why we want to have these conversations before, and as state representative, I would want to have these conversations with you so that I can get your feedback. Because these types of projects, they do have some pros, but they also have some cons. And we would have to decide as a community how we would approach this, not only on a local level, but on a state level. So let's kind of jump into this and have this conversation. And I would encourage you to check out my website as well, which is pachecoforthepeople.com, where I've posted some more information on this, as well as other positions that I have during this campaign. Because you have the right and you should want to know what your state representative candidates are representing. So with regard to the large-scale data collection site or data centers, what does that mean? So here's what it is. They have these large buildings that they build. And inside these buildings, they store hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces, depending on how big the center is, pieces of equipment, computer hard drives, and other electronics that they use to support their operations. So the operations that they're looking to support are things like cloud computing, AI, internet storage, and digital communications. So pretty much the types of things that you would expect that would need this much equipment or hard drives. So here's some of the pros, which they call pros. So the first pro is that typically when they're building these things, there is an influx of tax revenue because they're consuming space in your town or city. And they are very quick to wave that, we're going to be infusing thousands of dollars into your tax revenue every year because of the amount of space we're using. And, let's call it what it is. Our towns right now in New Bedford and Dartmouth are struggling. We're not getting the same amount of state aid that we used to, and we could use more, and the formula is broken. And so now we have towns like Dartmouth and cities like New Bedford that are scrambling with some real tough challenges about how to keep things spinning without having to either raise your taxes or to cut your services. And depending on who you talk to, some people are in favor of raising the taxes in order to keep all of the services at the level they're at. And there are others that are saying, absolutely not. I will never support an override. And you can cut services. So it just kind of depends on what camp you fall in. So you could see where their offer of increased tax revenue could become pretty appealing to a city or town that may be in dire straits. The other thing that they tend to waive is the fact that they also offer job creation. Who doesn't love job creation? So here's the thing though, the job creation offers that they're offering tend to be very short term and tend to focus more around the construction of the facility than it does actually post-construction, because these centers are pretty much run yourself. They're all electronic. So they may have some people in there, maybe 5 or 10, if that, that will be in there to kind of do maintenance and check on the equipment and those types of things. But for the most part, they're pretty self-maintenance. So there's not really a lot of job creation involved behind these projects. But let's talk about what we do know about these projects. So as we said, they take up a lot of space. In order to do that, they need a lot of land. And usually there's significant environmental impact because they have to clear a tremendous amount of area, not only for the building, if it's not an existing space that they're using, but around the building. So we're talking about loss of greens, trees, all of the things that we pride ourselves on having here in our open spaces, both in Dartmouth and in New Bedford. And they don't typically fit in really with the character of the area for the most part, which we also pride ourselves on quite a bit here in Dartmouth and in the north end of New Bedford. And we've been seeing some challenges with this, particularly with the development of 40B projects. So these 40B projects that are being proposed, as many of you know, particularly here in Dartmouth, are very large scale, and they don't typically fit into the character of the area. They do bring increased uses of resources in terms of public safety, education, and water. And in Dartmouth, we have a significant shortage of water the past few years, to the point where we've had to buy from our friends and neighbors over in New Bedford. We've spent about $2 million in the past couple of years. So when we get a project like one of these large-scale data centers, we have to look at the big picture of what they're actually proposing versus will the good outweigh the bad. So let's talk about what some of the bad is that comes along with the large-scale data centers. The first, obviously, is the environmental impact. Not only just because of the amount of space that they take, but also the amount of water that they consume. These buildings rely on tremendous amounts of water on a daily basis to keep the cooling systems that run these systems intact. So if you've ever worked with a laptop or a desktop, and you've worked with it on your lap or next to your leg, you know, over a little bit of time, they throw off a decent amount of heat. Well, when you put hundreds or thousands of units in the same space, you can imagine the amount of the heat that gets generated in these buildings. This is why they need these cooling systems. But in order to run the cooling systems, they need, again, hundreds or thousands of gallons per hour to be able to keep this building cool and make sure that the equipment doesn't fail. So we know that we have a water shortage in Dartmouth. We know our water rates have gone up 13% in the past year alone. We know that we've been buying from our friends and neighbors over in New Bedford. And we also know that now, as of this video recording, we're about to pick up about 137 new units of housing on Tucker Road, also known as the Hawthorne. And by their projections, they're projecting about 53,000 gallons of water of usage a day. That's for toilets, showers, dishwashing, and whatever miscellaneous. So you can imagine having that type of pull on our water resources and then having a project along these lines being brought into our town, how we could face some challenges with regards to our water. We know that our water supply is not an infinite amount of water. And in reality, our friends and neighbors in New Bedford at some point could say to us, hey, Dartmouth, I'm sorry, but we can't sell you any water because we're in drought conditions or we have our own situation. And that could be a real issue for the people of Dartmouth. So that is something we would definitely need to take into consideration if one of these were proposed for our area. The other thing is the amount of noise they make. These buildings are meant to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days. So they're constantly running, they're constantly buzzing, and the equipment that they use to make sure that these buildings are functional all of the time include very large diesel-powered generators as backups in case for some reason they happen to lose power. And those throw off not only a lot of emissions, but they also throw off a lot of noise. So if this type of center gets built somewhere around a residential area, you can imagine how that could impact those folks that are living over there. So the other thing that we need to talk about with regards to these buildings is the amount of threat that they have in terms of open spaces, farmland, and just their general fit into the area of where they could be built. So, New Bedford has a number of large structures that have been abandoned or that they've been rehabbing over the years that were former mills that could be ideal for these type of projects, appealing, but not necessarily a good fit for their economy. And certainly we have a tremendous amount of open space here in Dartmouth that the developers have been coming in and taking a look at and proposing some significant projects on. But we would need to be able to say to the developer or project manager or a realtor, whatever, that, these are hands-off area. So that's why we have these conversations now, so that we can identify these areas that could be hands-off if someone were to come into town and propose this. I don't know. I'm really interested, and I've posted a poll on our page that I encourage you to go in and look at and perhaps answer. What are your thoughts as the residents of the 9th Bristol District? What direction or marching orders would you give me as your state representative on Beacon Hill to represent you up there? Do we think that data centers, large-scale data centers, are the way to go for development in towns and communities like Dartmouth and the north end of New Bedford? Or do we oppose them? I certainly have my own opinion of it. I think that it would be a poor fit for our community, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the last answer on it. So please, I would encourage you to check out our website, pachecoforthepeople.com. On there, there's a form that you could fill out if you have an opinion that you'd like to share. Also here on Facebook, there's a post with a poll that you could fill out. But most importantly, it's your voice that needs to be heard. So please jump on it and do so. Please share this video with your friends, your family, your neighbors, people that could potentially have an opinion or be impacted if these types of projects come in. But as I mentioned, this is something that we want to talk about now rather than when it's knocking on our door. And so we have a clearer path on, are we receptive to these types of projects in our community, or are we hands off? So I want to thank you all for watching today. I hope we've struck up some discussion. I've posted the content of my full release on this topic of the large-scale data centers and what they could mean for the South Coast area. And I appreciate you for watching. Thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. This weekend, please take a moment to remember those who have given their lives in service to our country and to all that that means for us. They are the real heroes, and we should be very appreciative of everything that they've offered, including ultimately their lives. I unfortunately can speak to the fact that I had a classmate of mine from high school who lost his life in service in Afghanistan, and you never stop forgetting about them. So thank you all for watching, and have a restful and peaceful Memorial Day weekend. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.